Okay, so we're here today with another quick video. This time we're going to be talking about the new kit that you all have received already. Instead of doing oyster mushrooms this time, we're going to be talking about how to grow lion's mane mushrooms. A lot of the principles and techniques to grow lion's mane are similar to oyster mushrooms and indeed similar to other mushrooms as well. So this is going to be a short video. If you haven't seen the oyster mushroom video yet, we encourage you to go back, watch that whole video to kind of give you a basis for working with this kit, since we're not going to be getting to all the specifics of growing mushrooms, just kind of how to work with the kits that you're getting today.
So just like the oyster kits before, these are bags of mushroom substrate, which is mostly hardwood sawdust and soy hulls. That's like added protein and water, and then it's sterilized, cooked, inoculated with mycelium, and then it's grown out for a couple weeks, and that's the stage that you're going to be getting it here. So the white stuff you see, that's the mycelium, and when it starts to get even brighter white, that's the mycelium that's wanting to turn into mushrooms.
Yeah, and as you can see, the kits that you're going to be getting actually have a little bit of mushroom growth coming up the top of the bag. That's actually completely normal. There's a little bit of oxygen in here that kind of encourages the mushrooms to grow upward, but today we're going to be making a new spot for the mushrooms that gives it a lot more oxygen and growing a nice fresh fruit body out the side of the bag.
Alright, so lion's mane is a different mushroom than the oysters. The oysters have gills underneath, and that's where the spores are formed. Lion's mane is a different form, and it doesn't have gills. It has little tiny teeth that, this is kind of a adolescent, I would say, lion's mane, so it still has a lot of growing to do. The teeth are really small, but they will continue to grow as the whole mushroom kind of expands like a growing cumulus cloud.
Besides looking a lot different, lion's mane mushroom have some unique properties to them. They actually are pretty good for your brain when you eat them. There's certain compounds that are not found in any other mushrooms that exist in lion's mane that can help rebuild your neurons and potentially improve cognitive function when you eat them.
And cooking wise, they have a lot of moisture and they have a lot of sugar, so they're very juicy, and you're going to want to watch exposing them to heat for too long because they will brown very quickly, quicker than other mushrooms. And people describe the texture and the flavor kind of like crab or lobster.
All right, so we're assuming that you've already watched the oyster video that we did a number of months back. A lot of the principles for growing mushrooms apply. So really we're just going to kind of get into the specifics of how to open up your lion's mane kit. But just as a reminder, the major things that mushrooms need to grow are a lot of humidity. So we're talking about like 90 to 95% humidity. And we're also looking at a lot of fresh air at the same time. So that can sometimes be a tricky thing to balance, but we're going to show you how to do that with the materials that we have, or you should be able to assemble at your home. One more thing probably to note is that a lot of times people have a conception that mushrooms like to grow in the dark. That's actually not true. A lot of mushrooms actually benefit, in fact most benefit, from a little bit of exposure to light. So if you're near a window, that's actually a good thing. You don't need to black it out or anything like that.
Yeah, you just don't want to be like in direct sunshine. Like indirect sunshine coming through a window is perfect.
Cool. So we can start getting into what to do with your kit as soon as you get it. Pretty much it's ready to go as is. All you really need is a sharp blade. And in this case we have 2 bamboo sticks, but you can also grab some sticks from your yard that are kind of thin and relatively straight, or you can use a longer pencil or a couple pencils. And those are just going to be to hold up the humidity tent that we're creating, so you provide enough room for the mushroom to grow and enough airflow and like a plenum or a space for humidity to build up.
So you're going to take your kit and about halfway up, well, first of all, you're going to look for an area that might have a little bit of, might be a little bit more white. So you can kind of see that's going on right in this section. So I'm going to make a little T or like a plus sign about like 2 inches by 2 inches here, right in that little zone. It's okay if you flick the sawdust a little bit That's perfectly fine. And so we're opening that up. So that is where your mushroom is going to grow. And your mushrooms may also grow from where your pencils or chopsticks or whatever you're using as sticks poke in, because lion's mane they can sense where the fresh air is, and they will start to produce mushrooms in those areas. But they're not going to be as big as your main cluster of lion's mane mushrooms.
Yep. So essentially what we're doing is we're just opening up a hole to provide oxygen. The mycelium senses that, and that's how it knows where to put the fruit body out, or the mushroom itself out.
Yeah, so once you make that little, your little cross, you can just mist it lightly, and mist your friend too, especially if it's a hot day. And you know, that's just one of these ways of boosting humidity that we'll talk a little bit more about.
Cool. So you notice that we cut right here, there's a filter patch on the top of the bag which allows a little bit of like gas exchange while the mycelium is going through the substrate, but it really doesn't matter if it's this side or this side. We're really just looking for the whitest spot that you have on the bag. And as you get into it more and grow more mushrooms, you might notice that certain types of mushrooms create like a thicker growth of mycelium, so it looks really white and dense. In the case of lion's mane, even though it sort of looks brown right here, lion's mane is just kind of a wispier, thinner mycelium, but it's definitely all penetrating all around, and it's there, it's just kind of a little bit more translucent. All right, so once we have the X, what we're gonna do is, we have like somewhat smaller bags. You can use a bigger bag and bigger sticks, that's totally fine. But we're just gonna kind of make kind of a little stand for the bag right here. And I'm putting them at a 45-degree angle, outward facing, so we can provide enough room for a tent. And the idea is that the mushroom is going to be growing right out of this X right here. So we want to kind of get the bag off of the front, so the bag and the mushroom are not making direct contact. How'd I do?
I think those sticks are a little long.
Yeah, these sticks are a little longer than a pencil or a chopsticks. But they should actually they should do the trick.
You just want to keep the plastic from, you know, your mushroom's going to grow slowly, but you know, it could grow into the plastic. You want to try to avoid that. It'll be kind of weird looking if it starts growing against the plastic. So give it plenty of space to grow.
Yeah, and you'll see that we have a little bit of space on the bottom here, and that's actually really good because as CO2 builds up, as you might know from the oyster video that we did before, mushrooms breathe oxygen and expire carbon dioxide. So the carbon dioxide is going to build up in this humidity chamber, along with ideally humidity. So a little bit of space on the bottom for the CO2 to drop down since it's heavier is pretty ideal. Okay, so now that we know that our tent is pretty well positioned, we can go ahead and take that off. And I'm just going to give it a lot of mists up in here to build the humidity up. And if we just put this back on, it's going to be kind of dank and musty over time. So we want to make some slits or holes to allow the air to flow so the mushroom can keep getting the oxygen that it needs.
And another way to mist it, you might be able to just pick the whole thing up, kind of, as long as the mushroom isn't growing, and just spritz it up inside. But then once the mushroom's growing, you're going to want to take that plastic bag off because you'll be like spraying the mushroom directly a little bit too much.
So I'm going to make a couple slits in here.
And for lion's mane, I'd make them a little bit smaller than oyster. They don't need as much fresh air as oyster. It's actually funny, sometimes you'll find in the fall lion's mane mushrooms growing inside of red maple trees. You just kind of reach your hand down into this hollow tree and you feel one in there and you pull it out. So they don't need as much light or as much fresh air as oysters do. But they definitely still need some because they are a living, breathing organism.
Okay.
And
got a couple.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say you don't want to make you can kind of make them anywhere, your humidity holes, but or your air holes. You just don't want them in the very top because the top of the bag, humidity actually rises. It's lighter than air by a little bit, So if you put a slit at the top, it's like a chimney for your humidity coming out. So you just want to make sure it's not at the very tippy top.
Right on. So we're pretty good, and now all we need to do is kind of come back to the bag maybe once or twice a day and make sure that you see condensation up in the side of the grow tent, and you should be all right. And if not, you can continuously mist. Probably you're gonna have to mist, depending on how dry your room is, once at least a day. Maybe twice if you stay on it and you're in a drier zone. Cool.
And then you can actually continue, misting the mushroom directly. And here, I'll just kind of demonstrate how you would do it with this mushroom, where you're just giving it like a couple little mists. And when looking close at it, you want to see like little droplets. You don't want to see big droplets or any kind of pooling. That will turn your mushroom bad really quickly. But that will help keep the mushroom moist and happy. You're going to want to mist your lion's mane kit pretty much the entire time, except one, if you see droplets on the mushroom that might be being produced by the mushroom itself, you're going to want those to dry out before misting. And also, you don't want to mist when you start to see the teeth of the mushroom get over like 1/8 of an inch or so. At that point, you don't want to like saturate the mushroom.
Cool, so at this point you should be good to go. We mentioned growing your kit in a bathroom or an otherwise sort of humid spot, so you can, every time you shower, you're increasing the humidity in your zone, and that makes it a little bit more desirable for the mushrooms. So really just waiting to the point where you're harvesting. Maybe in a couple days to like 4 or 5 days, you'll start seeing a little bit of white growth poking out of the slit that you made. That's a good thing. That's a sign that it's working. Lion's mane take a little bit longer than oysters to grow, so you're really going to be waiting for about 2 to 2.5 weeks before harvest, maybe a little longer depending on the temperature of your room. But you know you're ready for harvest by actually the length of the teeth. So, like Tyler mentioned, this is kind of an adolescent guy. In the next about 3 or 4 days, the teeth are going to start getting a good deal longer and more pronounced. And as it keeps growing, the teeth will get longer. And you basically want to harvest when your teeth, which are like little icicles almost, that are about 1/2 inch, and that's usually a good time to harvest. You'll notice that the fruit body actually becomes a little bit less dense and a little bit more open, and that does a lot for the texture of your mushroom as well.
And another important cue to look for is if you look at your mushroom one day and it's starting to be like yellow on the ends, even just a little bit yellow, that's time to harvest, because at that point any mist is just going to make your mushroom kind of funky, and it has probably grown enough that it's got like a good flavor and a good texture.
Yeah, and in an earlier stage, if your mushroom is starting to yellow, it probably means that you don't have enough humidity.
So hopefully, if everything goes well, there will come a time when your mushroom, your lion's mane, is ready to harvest, and that's really easy. I mean, how do you do it?
I mean, I just kind of twist and pull is my method.
Yeah, you just kind of grab it. Try not to like jam your fingers into it. Be gentle, and then it'll break off from the mycelium pretty easily.
Yeah, and even though this is somewhat adolescent mushroom, we're gonna sacrifice it just for the point of showing you how we harvest. Only because we've already harvested the mature ones that we have before this video was made. So you can kind of get your fingers underneath the cluster, and you can kind of just twist it and pull it away. Yeah, and after you harvest your first fruit, you can kind of give that little divot that you've created by pulling out and plucking your mushroom, you can give that a good number of solid mists. And that will help the mycelium recover and get ready for the second flush. Okay, at that point you should be ready to go. So that's pretty much it for the lion's mane. We wish you a lot of luck and happy growing.
Good luck.